Vale. Pues eso va a ser muy íntimo, que voy a mirar los ojos y todo eso. La charla es en inglés, lo he preparado en inglés también, perfecto. Okay. It's just in English, it's much easier for me to talk about the stuff, and I want to concentrate on the subject, not on the language. Okay, so you get the time to see the cartoon, and the cartoon is like super funny, and it shows that the hiring is broken, right? Like we all know it, and we all kind of like accept it that like it is. Well, there's the disclaimer that this comes. I'm not a social science PhD who made a study about hiring in different companies. I did hiring, like hiring other people in 3 different companies, and I went on multiple interviews, and this subject just interests me a lot, and I talked with many developers about this, and this is the things that, this is the environment that I see. It might be some kind of bubble, and might be that you're working for a magical company that is like outside of it and hiring works, but I seriously doubt that like that's like this. So, what do I mean that the hiring is broken? First, it's subjective. It's not, we don't really get it. Like, it's, apart from the fact that we can philosophically discuss whether something can really be an objective truth or is that just perception of our mind, like, let's leave this all on the side. The problem is that the outcome of the interview is based a lot on who interviewed you. For example, somebody can have a bad day. Somebody can, like, today he makes more difficult questions, other day he makes easier questions, and all this stuff is not controlled by the, it's not controlled by the candidate. He can influence the score in some way, but it's not 100% of what you're scoring. It's also like, I don't know, 60% him, 40%, well, 30% the mood of the interviewers, and 10% the food that they have for dinner and the weather outside. So, other problem is that we are not taught to interview people. Like the way it happened with me and the way it happens with most of the people is that at some point comes at your career that, well, it doesn't happen that like the boss comes and says, okay, now you're senior enough and we value your opinion, and what we're gonna do is give you 2 months holidays where you go to an HR course where you will learn how to properly conduct interviews. No, the way it happens is that at some level of your career, the manager comes and says, yeah, the guy who usually interviews people is sick, called in sick, and I want you to cover for him. The interview is at 11. Here's the CV of the guy. And then you go there, and usually there are 2 people interviewing, so you just do what the other person does, like you mirror him. You don't contribute anything, and you just, for the rest of your career, you keep on doing the same stuff. Like we're just building up on the way other people interview, who are building on the mistakes of the people who came before them. So it's just like a vicious circle of incompetence. In general, of course. The problem is with the process is also it's unpredictable. So like I said, the same candidate with 2 different interviewers can score differently. And this is based on the fact that there is no strict process of hiring people. So there's no, people just kind of, yeah, I have an interview in like 15 minutes, I have to invent some questions. Yeah, like, oh, is he more junior or is he more senior? Like, yeah, so we're kind of asking some difficult stuff. Oh, I had this problem at work yesterday, I cannot figure it out what it is, maybe we'll ask him, maybe he will know. This is the way people do interviews. And but the most important problem is it gives you false results. It's like it doesn't work in terms like you have a process that gives you bad data. And but bad data, I mean, one is that you have a bad candidate who shouldn't get a job and you hire him, and the second you have a good candidate who should have gotten a job and you rejected him. In most of the industries, they only care about the first part because they have enough applicants to be able to pass the good guys as well. But in our industry, like the last company I worked with we had 1 candidate every 2 or 3 weeks, and it's not an environment where you want to like filter out people that you're not sure about. And well, the question is, why do we even care? Like, I know you guys, but like I spent a lot of time being just a developer. It wasn't my company. I didn't even have shares. I wasn't hired to do hiring. But like, the fact is that the coworkers are important. That this is something important enough not to leave it to HR and managers, especially to HR, because it is us who end up working with our colleagues every single day for 8 hours, and I hope it's 8 hours, because if you're working more, and like we can talk about it afterwards, but it's like a completely different subject. And it's not the HR who will have to solve issues with them. It's not the HR who will have dinners with them, like lunches, and so. This is too important to leave for other people to decide for us. We should be in charge. We should control the system ourselves. So, like I said, there's like things that matter every day with our coworkers. This is the mood, the well-being of us, the productivity they bring, because productivity also influences the mood. Like if you're struggling with one ticket for 3 weeks, then you're gonna be miserable for 3 weeks. But if you do 3 tickets in one day, it's gonna be a happy day, and you go home and it's like super nice. But there's stuff that they also influence your future. So from smart people usually have a lot to teach you. And it's also important for you to work with people who want to share knowledge, who want to do pair programming, because that's how you progress your like programming skills, your like workflow problem solving skills, to see how other people work, to work with them. And it's better if you learn from smart people, not from stupid people. And also it's important that if they're like curious themselves, interested in stuff, they want to learn new things, then you will want to do it as well. Like you will want to progress further, and in the long game, it's gonna help with your programming skills, with your career, and your general personal growth. So, this is a hiring manager, and I'm gonna use the term a bit, and it needs a definition, right? So the definition is basically this guy. So you know the comic, and this is a person who can make a decision about hiring. So if there's a candidate and there's always one person that in the end says yes or no, we offer him a job or we don't, and this is the hiring manager. Anybody else is this guy. So if you cannot, you can influence the decision. You can tell him, I really like him, I think our team really needs it. But if it's not your decision in the end, you're not the hiring manager. Even if you're like involved in the process from the beginning to the end, you contact them and so on. If you don't make this decision, you're not a hiring manager. So here we get to the Dilbert problem. So what I call a Dilbert problem is that the cartoon is really funny, and you have a boss and you have a developer, and it keeps on years. He keeps on living for years in the same shitty environment, and he does nothing to change it. The only thing he has to offer is a sarcastic comment. And this is a problem because we shouldn't consider ourselves to like, the point-haired boss is the hiring manager, and we are the Dilberts, because Dilbert is completely helpless. He doesn't want to change stuff. He just sits there and doesn't want to influence it, and he just, okay, another stupid idea that I have to deal with. Well, we don't. Worst case scenario, you can always switch a job. The market is like super good for it. But usually, there's a lot of things you can influence inside your own company without any decision-making power. Just by you can just do stuff, and they will not forbid you. So that's why I did this talk. This is about hiring, but just for developers. There is a lot of stuff I'm not gonna talk about, because this is the stuff that's in the competence of hiring manager. For example, like how to actually decide whether somebody should be hired or not. And there's a lot of stuff they can change, and it's difficult for us to change. So the only thing I'm going to talk about is stuff that the developers can influence inside their company without like forcing anybody to do anything. Just something that you can easily kind of like squeeze through when nobody notices. So how to do it? You just have to try. Like there's a lot of people who keep complaining and don't do anything, and I was one of those people. And then the hiring manager went for 3 days holidays, and I thought this is the time to change stuff. And I started, and everything that I changed stayed this way because they didn't want to change it back. Like there's the whole, especially in like the bigger company, there's more this like passive way. Like the things just stay this way. If you push it in some direction, nobody will push it back. It's gonna stay like this. If you push it a little bit every single day, in the end you're gonna get what you want. So everything which is not forbidden is allowed. This is the main idea behind the English law. So, and it's also the way things work in the office. There are people who say, yeah, but we don't do things this way. Like, was there a memo that explicitly forbids you from doing that? If not, you can do it. If somebody doesn't like it, they are free to say they don't like it, but you shouldn't be afraid that maybe somebody will not like it. Yeah, just do it and see what happens.
Can you play the card? I'm sorry, there are so many memos, I overlooked that one.
That's the second rule. Ask forgiveness, not permission.
Even if there's for
this actually, I worked with a Scrum Master who lived by this rule, and this was the best Scrum Master I ever worked with. It was a big company. Office was here. Company was German. More than 200 people. So you've got like this German organized corporation, and like could be the worst possible environment. But the Scrum Master played by this rule, and whatever she wanted to change, she just did it. And 90% of the time, she didn't have to ask for forgiveness. But the problem with permission is that if you ask somebody, usually it's safer to say no. Because if you give somebody permission to do something, things change, and they could change for the worse. And the higher somebody is in the chain, usually the less they want to change because the less they want to risk. And so she just did stuff, turned out well or turned out bad, but like usually nobody really said like, but you cannot do this. And she, sorry, I didn't get the memo. The third one is be the change you want to see. These are all cliches, but they are all very important. For me, this is especially important because I see it a lot that people say, we should do it this way, but they don't do it themselves. For example, we should write more tests in this company, and they don't write themselves. And then it's never going to happen, because you want other people to start doing stuff that you don't bother to do yourself. Like, this is not really cool. In terms of hiring, for example, like if something bothers you, don't really complain about it. Just offer some kind of solution. Try doing better work yourself. For example, if you think you were doing the interviews wrong way, don't make a meeting and explain everybody why the way we do interviews is bad. Just start doing it the good way with your interviewing partner. And if it's really the better way, the other people will follow. So instead of talking about stuff, like change stuff. You should remember that this is probably not what you were hired to do. So you should treat it as the pet project of yours, because that's how the management is going to see it, because you're supposed to be creating code and so on, and this is something you don't decide, it's like your extra thing. So don't get too stressed on it, don't get too stressed about it, don't put too much effort into it. You should tackle one thing at a time. So choose one thing that really bothers you and try to change this one thing. When it's done and you're happy with it, choose another one and improve the other one. There's no need to actually change everything at the same time. Like usually the company you work in was already doing well 5 years ago and it's still around. So if your change happens over 5 months instead of 5 days, it's still okay. It will also help you maintain a steady level of effort. This is important because this is how I imagine like the graph of people caring about the company looks like. So most of the time, nobody cares, right? At some point, Jim cares a little bit. Then he said, I'm gonna change the stuff. The next day, he said, the worst day, another time. The effort goes down. Then Susan was, I want to change this stuff. 2 days, like nothing happened. She goes down. And every time somebody else cares, but those spikes are like, they happen and they go down because there is no sustained effort in it. So what you should do, you should have like about this level of constant caring and constant effort, which will help fuel the people who actually like, this week somebody cares about something, like you can help them, you will fuel their passion for doing it, you will help them burn out later, but you yourself, you should keep this level like, yeah, I care about this stuff, I'm working on this one thing and I'm changing it. If you want to work on this other thing, like I'll help you a little bit, it's cool. And if everybody has the like cares a little bit, then like I care a little bit, somebody else cares a little bit, like it goes higher. These are not the spikes, they're like a constant effort of doing things better. So, I mentioned this before, no complaining. So, you shouldn't be raising problems, you should be proposing solutions. If you tell somebody, yeah, I think our hiring process is wrong, then like, you're not telling them anything. Like, what you should tell them, I think we could do better interviews if we change this thing into that thing. And then you frame the discussion away from, I think something is wrong with our company, or even, I don't think you're doing your job right, if you're talking to a VP of engineering. You frame it into, how can we fix that? You just silently omit the phase where we both agree that this is broken, and you move to the solutions phase. And it makes for a nicer conversation, there's no conflict, and it also pushes you one step further, like automatically. Just before you have the conversation with somebody, think about the solution, and when you come with the problem, come with a solution as well. They might not like it, they might want to solve it a different way, but still, it gets solved. A lot of companies do some kind of agile, scrum, stuff like this. And a lot of those companies, they don't do retrospectives. So what you should do...
One question. In the preview example, the problem with that is you are working on the solution domain instead of the problem domain. Do you think it's better start working on the solution domain? I think when you identify a problem, you shouldn't go to, especially the person who is in charge of it, you shouldn't go to them with a problem. You can talk with other people, especially other people outside the company. So like, to figure out what the solution should be, think about it yourself, talk with other people, and only approach the boss who can actually change it when you actually have an idea for the solution. So, what I mean is to not throw another problem on his back, just tell him, okay, we could do better if we do it like this. I thought like 3 weeks about it, and that's what I came up with. So you kind of, then he can agree, okay, let's try that, without acknowledging that, yes, I'm doing a bad job, and this is not the way it's supposed to be. Okay, agile retrospectives. A lot of companies don't do it, and like this is if you do agile or scrum by the book, you should do it after every sprint or every month or whatever. This is basically a meeting where you talk about what's going bad and how to improve it. And usually you should have at least one thing you want to improve for the next sprint. And this is something that goes really well with this subject, because this is a meeting about complaining and about fixing stuff. So if your company doesn't do it, you could just mention, yeah, I read this book about Scrum and they say we should do retrospective. Why don't we do retrospective? Maybe we should try doing the retrospective. It's not about that I want a meeting to complain about what's broken with hiring. It's like, no, the Agile says that we should do it. And like, I just read it in the book, like you can see it in the book yourself. And then if we're doing Agile, we should be doing this. And this is not that I want to do this. No, this is the people who say that this is the correct way of doing stuff. And what you end up with is basically a meeting about where you can complain what's wrong, which is a cool place to be. The last of those small hacks is it's decision fatigue. Decision fatigue is this idea that we have some kind of counter of decisions that we can make during the day, and afterwards we're like off and completely tired. And it doesn't matter if the decisions are big or small. What matters is the number of them. So, for example, Barack Obama wears the same suit every day. It's not because it's like the best suit in the world. It's not physically the same suit. It's just all of them look the same. But it takes away one decision from him. What should I wear today? Like the same as every other day. There are people who do morning routines. For example, like they drink tea every day. So it's another like, should I drink tea or coffee with my breakfast? If you have, there's like one more decision. What should I wear today? Another decision. Should I shower before breakfast or after breakfast? And all this stuff like piles up, and before you leave house, you're like 10 decisions lost. And these are 10 decisions you could make about like the architecture of your project, about whether we should hire this guy or not. The way we can use this is people don't really want to make decisions, and if you write them an email saying, I was reading a little bit about this, and I think our interview process is broken, and we should improve it like this. What do you think? This is not the email you should write, because they need to think about it, they need to analyze what you actually said, and they need to reply in a coherent form. Like, especially, what do you think part is the worst, because they need to reply with 3 or more sentences, or they will seem stupid because they don't think. So, instead you should write, hey, I was thinking about our hiring process, and what bothers me is like, we don't really have standardized list of questions, so I created this list, and I will upload it to the official company repository tomorrow, unless there's something, you see there's something wrong with it. And then, by default, he says yes. Because you said, I will upload it to the official company repository tomorrow, unless there is something you want to say about it. So if they don't say anything, you just carry on like you said. You don't wait for their approval, because the silence from them is the approval. And if they are tired of making decisions, they will not want to make the decision, so automatically you get a yes. Just by the way you structured your emails. So this is the same hack like people, oh, we should meet one day. If you want to meet with them, you don't write, yes, we should. You just write, yeah, let's meet tomorrow, this place at this time. Is it okay? And it's a yes/no question. It's much easier than like figuring out where to meet, what time, does it go well, or like you should make your emails easy to respond in the way you want the outcome to be. So this was general stuff. Now we'll go through the whole process like step by step to see what can improve at different stages. So pipeline is getting the candidates. And you cannot really hire good people if you have mediocre candidates. And by mediocre candidates, I don't mean like unexperienced. I mean people who, even if they get experience, they will still be mediocre. Because there might be brilliant people who just you guide them well for 3 months or 4 months, and they become great developers, but they lack experience. What I mean like people who just don't give a shit. And so if you have a candidate like this, you won't make a good hire. So what you should improve? Well, one of the ways of doing this is you need the cool factor of the company. Like it might be that your company does cool stuff, but nobody knows it. It might be that your company does really shitty stuff, but there is some aspect that's really interesting. Like, for example, personally, I hate Facebook, and like. The values of the company, their product, and so on, it's like, it's terrible. But React Native and React.js are fucking awesome. And there is a way they can sell their company as a cool company by using some, like, okay, like, don't worry about this social media thing, like, it's like, but React, this is cool stuff, and we do it, come work for us, come work with us on the React. This is a selling point. Google, basically like selling advertisements, not cool, but amazing server farms, it's cool, it's interesting. There's always something that you can find interesting in your product, in your job, that you want to share, that other people will enjoy. So, going to user groups, speaking at events, and you can even organize meetings in your office. Like, there's plenty of meetups that don't really have a place to stay, like they don't really have all official meeting space. Just say, like, okay, Friday after work we have beers, we just come and there's gonna be one person staying and making sure nobody steals anything. And that's it, it's as simple as that. And this will make your company like known in the, like people will know it exists. It's like a big problem for most of the companies. Another important thing is you shouldn't badmouth your company in public. Like, everybody complains about their company, and I've been in an environment when we had gin and tonic supplied by the company in the fridge, and we were allowed to drink it at meetings, and I still complained about this company. There is always something that can be improved.
You say gin tonic?
Yes.
All right.
And the rule was that if you have 3 or more meetings during the day, on the 3rd one you can start drinking because it's cool. Like, so to limit the number of meetings. So there is always something to complain about, and if the only thing you say about your company is complain like, oh yeah, we have gin tonics, but I would like to have this cucumber with it, and there is no cucumber, never in the refrigerator. They never order cucumber. Then okay, what you should probably put the stress on is there are gin tonics in the office. So when you talk about your company, talk about the nice things. There's always something bad happening, and there are people who hide it, and you could be like, well, not really hide it, but unless you're working for like really, really, really bad company, then probably you shouldn't encourage people to join it, and also probably you should leave. But if you're happy there and you want to stay there, that's probably a good place, and why don't you say something that's good about it. And another thing, well, take pride in your work. This is a software craftsmanship group, so like here people care about the stuff they do, and make sure it shows. Like, make sure that people know that you value equality, and that you want to do work properly. Because there's another thing. Building your personal brand, like I'm a developer who cares about this stuff, and I have like open source project and so on, and by the way I work there, might make people want to join your company just to work with you. Which is cool, because if there are people who you want to work with, then it's a really good position to be in. Personally, I did join a company just because of the people who work there, and it's a huge factor. You want to work with your friends, or you want to work with people who you admire, or you can learn something from. So if you're one of those people who are known, they have like a strong brand, and well, there's like so many reasons to build your personal brand, and well, hiring for your company is like one of them. Okay. Job postings. Every single one of them is ridiculous, and okay. My ideal job posting would look like this. You explain what the company does, and you tell them you're looking for good developers, or people who are smart and under the right guidance want to become good developers. And that's it. That's everything you're looking for. You're not looking for 3 years of experience in an object-oriented language. You're not looking for people who are experienced working in an agile environment. You're not looking for excellent troubleshooting skills. The excellent troubleshooting skills, like, this is something that the candidate is supposed to judge himself before applying. Like, this is ridiculous. Like, those are really like empty sentences. And what happens is you have a job posting that's like this long, and the only part that matters is this one, which is like we do web development in Python. So basically, if you want to do Python, just come and join us. And the rest is just bullshit and makes sure that nobody reads the posting. So what you can do here is what I did, I think twice. There was that, again, you said like, I looked at our job posting, I'm not sure if it's up to date, so I wrote it a little bit, and here's the new version. I'll just upload it tomorrow if everything's fine. So you just write the job posting yourself, which is gonna be, even if you suck at writing job postings, it's gonna be better than one written by HR people. So just write it yourself. Think about like, if you're working here, they're probably aiming for people like you. So if you write the job posting, the people like you are gonna like it. Okay. Another phase, screening candidates. This is the process where you haven't actually met them and you make this ridiculous decision that they are not good enough to work with you. It could be either screening by looking at a CV, it could be like a phone call, or it could be a coding test. So the only thing I consider that makes sense is a coding test. And screening based on the CV just filters out a lot of good candidates who worked in shitty companies, or people who, for example, have been hobby programming for 15 years, and now they want to do a career switch, and they don't have any experience, and you just scratch them out, because he's like junior, he doesn't have any experience. I have a friend who hobby programmed an OpenGL game that connects by network and lets you do like multiplayer game where you shoot each other with tanks, like riding around, like something that I wouldn't write. He did like hobby program on his side while he was doing a PhD in physics, and then he realized that he doesn't really want to have a PhD in physics and he wanted to become a programmer. And there was a problem because he didn't have any programming stuff on his resume. This is probably a person you shouldn't be passing on. So checking the CV. The CV is just like information there's like some conversation starters for the interview, but it's not a filtering device. So a coding test is a good way of filtering because it filters out people who actually cannot code, which might be important if, for example, you get CVs from veterinarians or firemen, which also happens. So the coding test should be blind, meaning the person who gets the coding test to score, they shouldn't be looking at the CV. And it's very easy to do it yourself. Like when you get a coding test and the CV, you just don't open the CV, you delete the file, and you score the test. And after you scored it, you can look at the CV. And the reason you do it is because of all the unconscious biases. For example, if somebody doesn't have much experience programming, you will judge the test lightly because, he's just learning, this is okay if he's learning. If he's an experienced programmer, you will judge him more harsh and say, I expect this person to know this stuff. Now, the coding test should be one for everybody, just your expectations of the score should be different. If you, for example, this is important, scale. The coding test shouldn't be like pass or fail. It should be a floating point number that basically tells you on a scale from 1 to 10, how much is this score? How much does this person score on the coding test? You can say 375, 624, and this will give you some guidance about what kind of level they have, instead of guessing if he's a junior or senior and then passing, and then applying those criteria to your scoring. You should first score them and see, okay, from 1 to 10 he scored 2, it means he cannot program, or he scored 4.5, which means probably he's some kind of a junior, or he scored 8.7, so probably he's a senior. Like, judge them on their competences, not what you see in the CV. And you should have criteria. This is gonna come up later as well, but basically you cannot really judge people if you don't know what you are judging them on. So, for example, what we did the last company was that the coding test was judged like, if you think that the code is elegant. This is a shitty criteria, by the way, because it's completely subjective. It depends a lot on the people who look at it. Fortunately, it was like a Ruby Rails company, so the Ruby guidelines are kind of more or less strict. So a lot of people agree that the same things are good. So it was like kind of okay. But it could be code elegance. It could be test coverage, and this you can actually easily say, okay, he didn't cover this model and this controller, so it's 2 out of 5, for example. If the tests cover edge cases, if the JavaScript works, for example, like if you have some JavaScript object, you can say, okay, if he writes it, if he uses like on-click and there is this point, but if he redirects it somewhere with those funky things in controller, it's like -3 points. Like you can have objective scale of like particular things that you're looking for because you control the coding test. You send it to a lot of people, so you know what they write and you know what you're looking for. Like the criteria will probably evolve while you're scoring. For example, you realize, okay, scoring on this criteria doesn't make sense because everybody gets maximum points here, so we can just drop it. Let's find something where they differ. There's important thing, you should look both for positive and negative things. Like it shouldn't be, let's find what's wrong with this code. No, you should look also for what's good with it, but keep the critical mindset as well, like try to balance it. Okay, good coding test should be repeatable. Should be easy to review. It means that if you have a lot of candidates, it shouldn't take you like more than 10-15 minutes to review the test and give a score. It should be tested by, scored by different people in your company, at least 2, and you should have some kind of automatic system where you share notes. What we did was we had a GitHub repository where we just pushed their branch what they did, and created a pull request. We commented on the pull request, and then we closed it. So everybody could leave a comment. So in my score, for example, I leave my comments, what I think is good, what I think is bad, and then leave it for like an hour, and then come back to see what my coworker wrote, and then I score it because there might be something that I missed. For example, like there is a mistake with caching, and like if somebody runs this application on a Saturday, then it doesn't work.
But your coworker is able to read your previous comment?
Yes, yes.
So maybe his mind is a little bit fixed. Maybe it's better if there is no sharing.
That's a valid concern. We thought about this. We tried it in the beginning to do it blind. Everybody writes it on their computer and sends the score to a third person who gathers all the scores and gives the final one.
Let's go.
But what we realized is there was a lot of things that there were mistakes that we didn't see. That, for example, I didn't see and my coworker did. For example, this bug because there was like something about getting currency exchange rates from a bank, and banks are closed on Saturdays. So basically, the code didn't work on Saturdays, and I didn't see it in the first place. My friend saw it, so probably there's something I should take into my code review. Especially if you spend like 10-15 minutes reviewing it. Yeah. Like after a while, if you're reviewing the same exercise over and over again, you look for all the gotchas and all the edge cases like instantly, and it gets easier. In the beginning, it's cool to share the notes. Also, when you share the notes, you kind of learn what other people are judging, because like the criteria are official, but for example, you don't care if somebody uses 2 ampersands or an end word, because you could kind of interchange them. But I do care, and my coworker doesn't care. And then we can figure out whether, one, I can learn why he has a different opinion about it, and the second, we can have a clear company policy about does this company care. Make the coding test interesting. There is a great example. There is a Matasano cryptography challenge. Matasano is a security company from Chicago, and they published a cryptography challenge for developers who are not security experts. And basically, you've got 8 sets of exercises where you go through simple cryptography stuff, like you begin with breaking simple codes where you exchange letters for the seizure code, where you exchange A to D, B to E, C to F, and so on. And well, the exercises get more and more difficult. You learn a lot about the basic cryptography and why it matters for web developers. And what they end up with is mailing list of people who manage to do all of them. And if you're a developer and you're interested in it enough to go through all of it, then probably you will be interested in working for them. So this was their way of hiring people. And also, I encourage everybody to do it, because especially if they do anything with cryptography in their daily job, because it's super nice. And it's also cool for learning new languages, because the exercises are simple, very well defined. Anyway, make them write meaningful code. By meaningful code, I mean you don't want them auto-generate anything. That you want to just every single character they type, you want to be able to judge. Everything that you see in the Git diff between the original version and their version, it's something that's their output that they thought through. It's not like copy-paste from somewhere. Or like, okay, now we have to install a library that does it, and like we put, I don't know, 500 lines of code of a foreign library. And the last, it should cover your particular needs. Well, this you're gonna see in the bad examples. So, if you do a Rails to-do list application, then 95% of the code will gonna be auto-generated. If you want to rate it fast, like score it, then good luck with this, because you're gonna be looking for his actual contributions. You're gonna be searching for the code he wrote himself, and it takes time. And doesn't really. Also, a to-do list application is like, you can go so far with it, like you can make it a really nice, you can work a lot, spend a lot of time on the front end and make it nice and pretty, and you can like have different users or just one user and so on. Like there's a lot of ways you can understand the subject, and the coding test should be easy to do, so it should take just a few hours, so they can do it on the evening. It's not too much effort, and it should be strict where the border is. Like, we want you to do exactly this, and he should know where to stop, like making it nice. Coding katas. These are terrible for two reasons. One, people do them by themselves, so they already know. There's a good chance that somebody already did this coding kata. I had a situation, an interview, where in the programming part of the interview, we sat down and we wanted to program with him a coding kata, and he said, that's cool, I did it 2 weeks ago in Java. Okay, that's not cool. Because you want everybody to have the same starting point. If somebody wrote this particular exercise 2 weeks ago, that's probably gonna do better than somebody who didn't.
Sorry. I used to do coding kata per programming interviews, so bring your laptop and so on and so forth. And when that happened, I found that I could focus on the person interaction, how she would fit on the team. Was he discussing his decisions, and did we understand each other? Were we on the same page, and this kind of stuff? So we wouldn't focus on the code. So I understand that these examples are for home assignments.
This is for a home assignment, but I also mean it for the on-site interview. And the reason I mean it is like, you're right, it makes you appreciate other things. But one of the goals of the interviews is to have a measured score of the candidate.
Correct. Yeah,
and
you're right.
you want to concentrate on the same stuff for all the candidates.
Yeah.
That's why anything that somebody might have done before, you want everybody to start on the same level. Also, coding katas are a bit thing, especially for the coding test, because they don't reflect your the code you normally work with. So unless your daily job is about writing katas, then like they have no connection to the work you do. The same for algorithmic exercises. Like if somebody you want them to do 3 ways of sorting, then unless you work in a sorting company, then just doesn't make sense. That's interesting. Fixing open source issues. That in the beginning we thought it's cool. We can send him an issue and tell him to fix it, or just go as far as he can with it, and we can see. It's like, one, he contributes to something that's like better good, like it makes the world a better place as part of our job interview. But the problem is that's not repeatable, because if somebody fixes the issue, you cannot give it to the other candidates. You cannot compare them.
Sorry, I would add to the previous list, actually, that is provide feedback. I think it's quite important to provide feedback to
the candidate. Yes, this is really cool. Actually, a lot of companies do that when the candidate asks, like at least in Europe. The problem is in the States, because if you provide feedback and in the feedback you say something that's illegal, they will sue you and you will lose your money, so the safest thing is to not provide feedback. In Europe, they do if you ask. And the problem is that a lot of people don't ask. It would be nice to provide feedback always, but it's not something you can do as developers. This depends on the hiring manager, who actually decides on the offer and like rejects the candidate or accepts the candidate. That's why I didn't mention it. So, good examples. You write an existing app. Oh, well, probably you should write a fake application, especially for the coding test, because you don't want to send your application's code to anybody. And you tell them to add a simple feature to it. Like, for example, we have this application, we want a search box, and we want it to be powered by Elasticsearch. And that's it. Like, it's easy to understand problem. He will have to, everything that he writes is gonna be his own. Or, for example, you create an existing app, and it has a bug. And you say, like, when I click here, I want to go there, but it's redirects me somewhere else. And then they have to debug, understand the whole application, fix the bug, and you will see how they fixed it. If they found, you can provide some edge cases. And because you created the app, you can put some things that like, yeah, he wants to go the obvious way, change it here, change it there. And there is some fuck up with the special version of some library that we're using that has a bug. And you can craft this to give him a really simple task. When they try to do it, it gets more and more difficult. Like, there are some hidden, unmentioned specifications, or you can see what he will do if he finds that he has to modify a code that is not covered by tests. But this is not a class that he wrote. Like, is he gonna write the test for the whole class, just for the stuff that he modified? Is he just gonna ignore it? Stuff like this. And from the beginning, like the first interactions with them, you should make them feel comfortable. This is important because we don't want to judge how well they do on the interview. We want to judge how good an employee they're gonna be. So the more natural, the more comfortable they feel, they're gonna do better. Our job is to make them able to show themselves from the best possible angle. Like, if somebody is nervous on the interviews, you want him not to be nervous, to show you that he's a really good developer worth hiring. And you can do it, well, obviously, you have to introduce yourself. Still, a lot of people don't do it. You should explain the process. And if you cannot explain the process because you don't have a process, because you kind of like figure out how he goes and you give him 2 or 4 interviews depending how he does, then it's probably another problem that you have. But you should be able to explain him the whole process and tell him, okay, now we're gonna sit down, you're gonna talk with us for 45 minutes, we're gonna code for 20 minutes, we're gonna judge you on this, this, and that, and so that he knows there is no like hidden camera that will for example, figure out if he, dresses correctly. Like, which is ridiculous, but I know people who rejected candidates because they came to the interview in the suit and they were like, oh, this suit? Like, no real good developer that I know wears suits. And this is ridiculous to judge somebody on the way he dressed for the interview. Anyway, so this obviously, like you can see, is how on-site interview looks like. That's the whole process. So if there is a lot of companies that actually do it more or less like this, and well, we shouldn't. So I should. I want to encourage you to use the specific questions. To have a list of questions that you ask all the candidates, and it's really much, and they're always the same. And no two groups ask the. For example, Group A asks those questions, Group B asks those questions, Group C asks those questions. And if you have the same groups, it's much better. Like, for example, usually it's like the interview pairs are constant. Like, I always interview with Jim, and somebody else or interviews with somebody else, and so like they are. So if they're the same people asking the same questions, they are gonna score the same way. So it gives us repeatability. It gives us a possibility to switch interviewers, because if you switch an interviewer and he will still ask the same questions, you get closer results to when you switch the interviewer and then have a different person asking completely different questions. So you kind of, if somebody is sick, you can switch interviewers and you are more or less the same. And the way to switch into using specific questions is just compile a list of questions and send it to everybody. The reason why people invent the questions on every single interview is because they don't have a list. And nobody really wants to invent questions all the time. They would like to have less work to do, and they just come and ask the questions from the list and see what happens. The problem with specific questions is that a lot of people go crazy. And if you're inventing the questions, you will invent something that's kind of not too difficult. But if you want to create a list, people who add questions on the list, they want to seem smart. And they ask questions for like a Rails developer. We should ask them, okay, you have a processor, and in the register you have the following numbers. What's gonna happen if I write this instruction in assembler, and what's gonna be the content of the register after like running this assembly program? When I first did this to propose a list of questions, and I saw the first contributions, I wasn't able to answer half of them, which probably means they are not really good questions for the interviews, because I consider myself an experienced developer in the niche that we were hiring in, and we would be like asking questions. If I cannot answer them, people who are less experienced than me probably will not be able to answer them as well, and this makes this question pointless and a waste of time, and just makes the interviewer feels better that he knows the answer and the other guy doesn't. Like, there is a general rule about the interviews. If the interviewer feels good about what he's doing, he's probably doing it wrong. It shouldn't be a pleasant process for the interviewer. It should be pleasant process for the interviewee that also scores him.
Don't you think it's important to ask a difficult question to test the way they think?
Yes. What we did, because we come back to this whole thing that I forgot to talk about, junior, senior. You shouldn't judge whether somebody is a junior programmer or a senior programmer before you interview them, because what are you judging them on, right? So you should, in my opinion, you should ask the juniors and senior, people who you consider juniors and people who you consider seniors, you should treat them the same, ask them the same questions, and just expect, and based on how they did it in the interview, you consider them, okay, this we would hire as a junior programmer, this as a senior. If somebody has 15 years of development, years of experience in Java, and he did on the junior level, and you give him an offer for a junior position with Java with a junior programmer salary, then he will probably refuse. But that's how he did, and it's okay, because for a senior, you don't think it's good enough. But what we did, we ended up asking junior questions in the beginning and senior questions afterwards. So what happens is the senior people, they go for the juniors questions first and answer the senior questions as well, and they will get more points. And the junior people will struggle on the junior questions, and they will answer some of them, and then the senior questions they won't be able to answer, so they won't get points on it. But you're judging them on the same scale, the same criteria, and just you have to have questions that will allow juniors to say something, so you be able to distinguish this is a better junior, this is a worse junior. And you need to have questions that will allow senior people to shine. This is like a senior people can show they are better. Also, there is a problem. People ask trivia questions like, what does every single letter in the acronym SOLID stands for? And I don't know about you guys, but I remember S and L, and that's it. But basically, these are trivia questions that even if somebody knows all the principles, out of their top of the head, they might not know the names. But what you should be asking is that, what we did, we have 3 questions, and we allow them, okay, this is the first group of questions, choose the one that you feel comfortable with, and answer this one. Another group, another 3 questions, more difficult. Another group, another 3 questions, each group more difficult than the previous one, but in every group, he can choose which questions he answers. Okay. We don't have much time, so I'm going to run through it. The criteria I talked about it. This is the formal criteria. You have to have a list of things that you're looking for. It shouldn't be things like, we're looking for somebody smart. How do you judge smart? There are like a lot of very smart people that are trying to still figure it out. It should be stuff like, I want him to know a little bit about networking. I want his knowledge about algorithms. I want him to know what are the principles of agile project management. Stuff like this. And interview score should be a float, not a boolean. Again, like you want to have scores because you want to compare, you want to collect data for future hiring. Like when you switch the process in the beginning, you're just collecting data for future decisions. Oh, this is a big one. So culture fit. This gets thrown a lot around. Like if you don't hire people and you say it's not, it's not a culture fit. It can mean anything. It can mean I didn't hire her because she's a woman, and I don't think women can program. I didn't hire him because he's a short, chubby smoker, and a short, chubby smoker once stole my girlfriend in high school, and I don't like people like this anymore. Or it could be I didn't hire him because he's an asshole. And actually the third reason is a good one. But what you should probably be judging on is the communication with people on the team and how he communicates on the interview, and you will just cut his score down on the communication scale and make sure you don't hire him. Or maybe what you should do is if he's like top score and everything else, just hire him and put him on a project where he works alone and nobody cares if he's an asshole. So, but basically the whole culture fit is something that you should be able to quantify. Like, it's something that you cannot say culture fit because it doesn't say anything. You should have a criteria why, if you want to reject someone because he's an asshole, figure out the criteria on which he will score low and make sure you don't hire people who score low there. These are the voodoo hiring methods. So the voodoo hiring methods is like stupid stuff you do on the interviews. For example, people who are the chatterboxes, like, oh, I saw you like racing motorcycles on your CV. I also like racing motorcycles, and then you spend 15 minutes talking about motorcycles. No, does make sense. Art critic, a person who says, yeah, for me, he feels good, like he's gonna be okay. Prosecutor, a guy who will bombard them with questions that are like yes, no, and won't allow them to speak. And this also doesn't tell you much, it's just like a trivia quiz. And the sweeter, it's like, he tries to sell the company, it's like it's really cool to work here, but he never actually evaluates the candidates because, well, he worked in Google, of course we want him to work here and we just have to make ourselves feel better. No, wherever he worked, you need to follow the process here. If he's a candidate we obviously want, we want to see how much he scores on our test, because if he doesn't score the maximum, it means there is something wrong with the test, and we can adjust the test. And the sponge is like a hiring manager who sends 10 different people to interview the candidate, and then just expect them to say, did you like him? Yes, that's good. And doesn't go into any detail, like why, like what's technical level, and so on. These are all the things that when you see them, like these are bad behavior that you should be correcting. Actually, yeah, that's what we talked about. There are people who who can program, and they go for hiring jobs, and they pass the coding test because they spent 3 weeks on it instead of 3 hours. So, as I said before, a special crafted app would be cool, or an error branch of your product. Because if they're on site and they don't take the code home, you can have your like frozen repo of your product or some feature branch, and there's a bug that's interesting, and tell them to debug it. It's super nice because it makes them work on a real code base. It makes them do stuff that are gonna be their daily job, and also makes them familiar with your code base. And they, for example, if you don't have any tests and they will not be comfortable working in this environment, probably they should know. They have a taste of what it's gonna be like to work here. Okay, the soft side. Explain exactly what you'll be judging on and how the interview is gonna look like. Put the stress on the communication. Like you said, try to judge how he communicates, how he works with you, if he explains what he's doing, if he's clear what he explains, the way he thinks. And have a computer ready. A lot of people don't really bring their laptops. Some people cannot really bring their laptops because they work on desktop computers, or their laptop goes stolen. You should have a machine ready which everybody uses to do the exercise. Different editors, different versions of programming languages, different programming languages, stuff like this. Okay, employee retention. It's also an important part because the whole hiring thing, like you do it to build a good team, and it doesn't gonna work if people are gonna leave. So stuff that you as a developer can do to improve the whole office environment, the whole employee retention thingy, is to share knowledge. It's like a lot of people leave because they are not learning anymore. So you should be programming, and you should be sharing stuff that you learned over the weekend. Like if you came across a new language and you think it's cool, maybe you should do a like internal company talk to show it why you think it's cool. Maybe somebody else will find some inspiration to learn something completely different, or maybe just this one. You will fuel each other, and if people are still learning there, they won't go. The most people basically leave the companies for shitty bosses, shitty pay, or they stop learning. You can do like book clubs where everybody reads a book and they talk about it and so on. There's also a problem with startups, especially like the environment where you work is super shitty. For example, but you can try to influence it with small hacks. Like if you want a standing desk, and standing desks cost now like 200 euros in IKEA, then your boss might not be particularly happy to buy you a standing desk just because you want it. So what you can do is you can go to IKEA, buy a €5 lag table, those small coffee tables, put it on your desk, and work for a month like this. This will show you will have a standing desk, a shitty one, but it's kind of good. I worked like this for a few months, and it's pretty good. But it will show your manager that you really want to have a standing desk, and you really care about it. And also, it might give you some numbers, for example, that your productivity got better. You fix more tickets during the day because you're better concentrated. And if you have numbers to show them, okay, it got better because I invested €5 in a coffee table, maybe you should invest the 200 euros in a standing desk. If you have the numbers, you can try to persuade them. Again, don't complain, try to find a creative solution how to convince people. Okay, that's it. Thank you, we're 4 minutes over time, but unless somebody comes knocking, you can ask questions and comment on it. I'm really curious what you think.
I have a question about culture fit.
Yeah.
Let's imagine this scenario. You are a startup or a grown company, which is very colorful, and bean bags and ping pong tables, and everyone comes in on their shorts and their flip-flops. One day, a candidate comes in dressed on a suit and tie, black, perfect haircut and everything, and suitcase.
Awesome.
Would you hire him?
Awesome.
Not hire him?
One thing I forgot to mention on the culture fit, because we're running out of time. Diversity. The whole topic of diversity, like, you look around the conference, there are 2 women here out of, I don't know, 60 people? 80. Are there any immigrants? I'm an immigrant. Like the whole structure is really, it doesn't mirror the structure of the society, which is one point. Like we're not a diverse group, like job group. The second thing is that studies show that diverse groups produce better products, produce better code, produce better output, which means just for the sake of productivity, you should hire people outside of your comfort zone. Because the reason why we hire people just like ourselves is the comfort zone. Because I'm not gonna hire him because if we go out for beers after work, what are we gonna talk about? Like, this is not a valid criteria. As an anecdotal evidence, I once hired, well, when I was working in a race shop, we hired this guy who just was doing some Ruby on the side, like hobby, and he was coming from a Java background, and before he did microcontrollers in C. And he was, I don't know, 8 years older than all of us, and so it wasn't particular, of course, like, he was a white guy from Barcelona, so he was still like kind of a lot similar to us, but from his background, we're thinking of rejecting, like, but he doesn't do Ruby, he's not a Ruby programmer. What turned out that he contributed a lot with his Java background and C background, because, for example, we had an application where we cared about performance. Well, the Ruby level of caring about performance is about this much. The C controller, so we cared the maximum like this. And the microcontrollers in C level of caring about performance, like this. So when we hired him, he spent, I think, 3 weeks doing pull requests that I found completely ridiculous. And I just approved them because they didn't make anything worse. I think they didn't make anything faster. I thought this was a waste of time. But I didn't want to, decision fatigue. I didn't want to spend time explaining why this is a bad idea. And it was like nothing changes really. Like if he changes an each to a 4 or an array to a set, like, yeah, just merge. And after 3 weeks, our application got, I think, 5 to 10% faster. I don't know which of the pull requests did that. If I go one by one, I will still consider each single one of them ridiculous, but it did get faster. And it wouldn't have happened if we hired a Ruby programmer, like somebody who's been doing Ruby for a long time, because we don't give a shit about Ruby. So this is a trivial example, but another thing. Now I'm working in I run a small development studio where we do mainly iOS. And my partner worked a lot of time in Germany, and the way he looks at the design, he says, okay, this button is cool, but what language versions are you going for? And he said, yeah, like UK, Spain, Germany. I said, okay, wait. Because the German words are so much longer that they will not fit here in the space where you provided. What do we do about it? Like, if it were somebody else doing it, like just Spanish people, you look through your own perspective and your own background. He spent a lot of time fitting long German words into small buttons, so this is the first thing he thinks. So there's a lot of things that we don't even consider that might be an issue. For example, if you talk the blind programmer that's gonna come tomorrow, it would be probably super interesting if he gave a talk about the way he programs, because I think it's completely different from the way we do it. And if you're creating tools for programmers,
he will present a 2-hour workshop
awesome.
On blind programming and how and accessibility tools and so on and so forth.
Great.
Don't miss that.
There are people who, for example, you're a Russian programmer. You want to program, all the programming languages are Latin-based. In Russia, they have Cyrillic alphabet, so you have to learn a new alphabet just to be able to program. In Russia, it's not such a big problem because you have the internet and you have easy access, and you learn European languages anyway. But people in Arabic countries, they invent their own programming language that basically uses Arabic characters, because it turns out that until 3 years ago, nothing like this existed. And you have the problem they write from right to left, not from left to right. Completely different characters, and also the way the, for example, you cannot translate one-to-one, just exchange this character to a different, because the sets are not overlapping. For example, we have A, E, I, O, U, and Y. There are like 6 different letters. They have 3, and they only work as an accent that you put on a different letter. So you cannot do a 4 like 3-letter character. So there are problems that we don't really think about, just because we're like all in the same, living in the same bubble. And apart from the whole like productivity and creating a better product, the whole experience of meeting people who are different than us makes us grow like as like human beings. We learn new things, we read new books, we just progress.
Thank you very much.
Very good.
A ver si queda. No lo pierdas el vídeo, ¿eh?